I have taken a page from the excellent book Programmed War Games Scenarios by Charles S. Grant. The page is not that easy to see in this photograph, but you will notice that the page is divided into 10 tabletops. The idea is that one force advances up the page tabletop by tabletop from 1 to 10. The top of table 1 matches the bottom of table 2, etc. So in essence, the whole thing is one long thin map of the terrain along a valley. This is a much clearer view of tabletop 1. It shows an escarpment or ridge in the top right corner, a road running roughly northwest, a small copse of trees or wood, and a narrow track that branches off the road and runs due north. You will notice that all the features carry on at the base of tabletop 2. I have laid out tabletop 1 on a small square table. All the features are here, as is a collection of troops, but more of those later. The size of the table is just 17 inches square. That's 43 centimetres for metric measurements. Not a huge area, I think you would agree, but everything fits on nicely, and some sleepy Union sentries protecting a camp are about to be surprised by some approaching horsemen. You can see the ridge at the top right of the table much clearer in this shot. The battles will be fought using a homespun set of rules, but using hints of Blucher and Commands and Colours Napoleonics, the dice from the latter featuring here. Hits will be recorded as per the dice face. The infantry, cavalry and artillery are self-evident. Cross sabres will only count in hand-to-hand melee combat, whilst the flag will force the unit to retreat. Casualties, or if you prefer, Ilan, will be marked with a coloured disc next to each unit. Reading from left to right, blue means 1 casualty, white 2, etc., to a maximum of 5, after which the unit is removed. Cavalry will be removed on 4 hits, so will not go above green. Artillery will be lost on 2 hits, so will never go above blue. June 1863. The Confederate Army is on the march. The main army under Robert E. Lee is way over to the east of this valley. However, a force has been detached to recon in force up this very valley. The rebels have no idea what strength of forces they may face, but intend to find out and, if possible, travel the full length of the valley, leaving its northern entrance heading east, to possibly appear in the flank or rear of any army confronting the main Confederate army. It is sunrise. 2 regiments of Confederate cavalry making up a screening and scouting force ahead of the force's vanguard, and being intentionally vague regarding the strength of forces, as they will be decided by dice rolls as the game progresses up the tables, so I have no idea yet myself. The rebel cavalry at bottom of the table spread out in a screen. Ahead is a small wood, behind which is a tented camp. It is occupied by a single regiment of US cavalry. About 25% of the men are spread out south of the wood on both sides of the road on picket duty. An artillery battery, not manned, they too are asleep, is also in place facing the southeast and giving good arcs of fire down the length of the road. Finally, a supply wagon and the cavalry mounts complete the scene. From Major H. Gilmore, 1st Maryland Cavalry, Confederate States Army, to Brigadier General J. Archer. June 4, 1863, southern entrance of Crooked Valley. Sir, my regiment, along with the 2nd Virginia Cavalry, under the command of Colonel T. Munford, entered the southern entrance to the valley at daybreak this morning. We soon came across a forward defensive post occupied by the enemy, which consisted of the 6th New York Battery under the command of Captain J. Martin, U.S. Army, and the 7th Michigan Cavalry under the command of William W. Mann, United States Army. The roll for initiative favours the Confederates. After a brief discussion, Colonel Munford and myself agreed to attack immediately. We could see only a few skirmishers defending the camp, the rest of the occupants apparently still asleep in their tents. Colonel Munford charged with his regiment at the sentries to the east of the road. I charged the enemy, located in front of a small wood to the west of the road. The enemy managed to get off only a few shots as my men advanced. They scored no hits. It was exactly the same for Colonel Munford and his men. The enemy had been taken totally by surprise. Our boys were soon among the enemy, and with pistols killed and wounded a number of them. Colonel Munford had similar success, and the enemy quickly threw down their arms, though it is believed 3 or 4 of them hightailed it down a narrow track heading north through the thick scrub in this location. By this time, partly clothed troopers and artillerymen of the enemy, awoken by the noise of battle, were streaming from their tents and attempting to form up. We did not let this happen and maintained the initiative. Colonel Munford charged the artillery battery from the flank. I quickly dismounted my men and moved fast into the wood beside the enemy camp. The enemy cannon never got off a shot and quickly surrendered to the colonel's men. My boys caught the still confused Union troopers with a salvo of carbine fire, felling a number of them. It was at this point that Colonel Mann, U.S. Army, ordered his men to lay down their weapons and surrender. We have captured in excess of 450 of the enemy, supplies of food and ammunition, over 300 cavalry mounts, a battery of 3 cannon with limbers and horse teams, as well as supply wagons with their teams. I was ordered to guard the prisoners by Colonel Munford, who was continued north up the valley with his regiment. I await your instructions, sir. H. Gilmore, Major, CS Army. I have decided to roll a d6 for each side to determine what potential reinforcements will be coming up the valley for the Confederates, and also what units will be in place on each table for the Union. An odd roll of the d6 equals a blank. An even roll then allows me to roll a number of command and colours dice equal to the number of pips. For the Reds, I rolled a 4, so proceeded to roll 4 C&C dice. Moving on to table 1 will be 2 battalions of infantry, 1 battery of artillery. A flag or cross sabres provides nothing. Moving up the road onto table 1 is Brigadier General James Archer, leading the 13th Alabama, 7th Tennessee Infantry, and the Huger's Virginia Artillery Battery. A closer look at Table 2. My recreation of the table, I was struggling to fit in a small hill for the trees to stand on, so I omitted it. The slopes of the valley sides are clear to see. The Union are all an odd number, so there will be no federal troops on this table. Colonel Munford must now make a decision. Does he continue forward or wait for the vanguard of the force to catch up? I intend to roll a d6 for that answer, a 1 or 2 when he waits for a more senior officer to arrive. Higher, and he continues to scout north. I've weighted it 2-1 in favour of what I consider to be his most likely action, that is to continue his scouting mission. I'm winging this and making it up as I go along. I don't want the Confederate forces to become so large and powerful that it simply steamrolls any opposition it meets, but at the same time, I don't want to place vastly superior Union forces in the path of the rebels. It's not a problem yet, but something I'll have to ponder as we move further along the valley. For those interested, I'm taking the units from the order of battle for Gettysburg. The Confederate forces so far are from Archer's 3rd Brigade of Heath Division. A roll of 3 means Colonel Munford and the 2nd Virginia Cavalry will advance up the valley. 2 or 3 miles to his rear, Major Gilmore and the 1st Maryland Cavalry, now relieved of prisoner duty, act as a screen for Brigadier General Archer's men. The rebel brigade makes its stately journey across Table 2. A closer look at what is ahead and facing Colonel Munford, and my interpretation of the terrain on the tabletop. The 2nd Virginia Cavalry survey the wooded slope on their right, a low flat ridge leading to the rising valley side to their left. Brigadier General Adelbert Ames, US Army, the 2nd Brigade of 1st Division 11th Corps, was not a happy man. He had 101 things to do at brigade headquarters, situated in the small town of Parksville, which sat beside the Hog River. The message that had flashed down the telegraph line from his boss, Brigadier General Barlow, situated further north up the Crooked Valley, had informed him that the Army of Northern Virginia was moving north, and reliable intelligence reported a force had broken away from the main army and could be heading for the valley. Adelbert had ordered the 41st and 54th New York Infantry Battalions to form up in march column. He would lead them south to the mouth of the valley. 2 battalions of 2nd Brigade, led by Brigadier General Ames, begin the march south. Damn scouts and spies, they saw rebels hiding behind every tree and bush north of the Potomac. He had the southern end of Crooked Valley under his command, and nothing would move into it without him knowing. A battery of artillery and a regiment of cavalry would be there to greet any damn rebels, real or imaginary. The Brigadier General shook his head. He doubted there was a rebel soldier within 40 miles of him. At that very moment, his movements were being watched through binoculars, held in the hands of Colonel Harry Gilmore, 1st Maryland Cavalry, Confederate States Army. Belatedly, Brigadier General Ames noticed riders ahead, and he quickly realized they were not Union cavalry. An odd roll, so no Confederate reinforcements will arrive on Table 1 this time. They have to travel up the valley. The main force must have been delayed. Further up the valley, the rattle of drums and the blare of bugles sent men rushing to their battle positions, the Confederate cavalry making for the wooded hill. There they would dismount to harry the Union infantry from the cover of the trees. The artillery horses snorted, struggled, and stamped their hooves as they dragged guns up onto the low ridgeline. Infantry shook out into line of battle across the valley floor. If General Ames had been an unhappy man earlier in the day, watching the rebels deploy cavalry, artillery, and infantry was not improving his mood any. Brigadier General Archer, on the other hand, was well satisfied. His cavalry colonel had kept him fully informed of the situation by dispatches, and once his main force had arrived, Colonel Munford had worked out a battle plan which utilised the topography of the section of the valley. He saw no reason to change the colonel's plan. No such plan existed for Brigadier General Ames, as he and his men watched with increasing concern as the rebels took up positions. It was as if they knew the valley and he didn't. For all his faults, General Ames was no fool. He knew he was outgunned and outmanoeuvred. He would have to conduct a fighting retreat back to the town of Parksville, where the remainder of his brigade was located. He scribbled a hasty message and sent it with a rider at full gallop.